So, hello everybody, my name is Yahya Ithawi and I will start the session about reading research articles in efficient way and within a reasonable time. So the objectives in this talk is to do a systemic approach of reading an article. But to know the systemic approach, you need to know the structure of the article. And also we will talk about how to read each sections of an article, the introduction, the method, the abstract, the result, and then the discussion, and then how you can make a final opinion. And hopefully at the end, we can do some practice and probably ask some question. So let's kick off the talk of what is slow but active reading is. So I'm going to unmute everybody, and then if you guys can answer the question. Any volunteer to answer the question? What is slow but active reading? Any volunteer? Any volunteer? What is slow but active reading? Okay. I'm going to mute all if there is nobody who want to answer, and I'm going to answer myself. And then with time, you'll see what did I mean by active, slow but active reading. So to read the articles, you need to know the acronym PICOT. But at the same time, PICOT acronym that we took on the first is not enough. But you need to know what is the target of that title, and also you should be able to and have experience in that area. So if I want to assess a research question in anesthesia, I would be not a good person because I'm not practicing. And also, I need to know the PICOT, and I need to have a target. What is the purpose of that research? Is it diagnostic? Is it therapeutic? Is it interventional? And so on. So that's the way how you assess the title. The abstract, you need always in any article to read the abstract entirely. The background, usually you don't need to read it. And the reason because if the research article in your field, you suppose, or I assume that you know the field. So the part you read in the background is the purpose. The method, you don't need to read it. You need to scan it. And I will show you how to scan the method. The result, including tables and chart, you just need to look at the table and the chart and how to assess them. You don't need actually to read, although sometimes in the result there might be a fact text that you need to know. But most of the time, the fact tests are demographic data, not more than that. But real result of the study is in the tables and the chart. Now, the background and the result, sometimes you need to go back and forth to the method and result when you read an article. If you do that structural approach to reading an article and you did not understand it yet, then probably you need to go to the entire article. Now, remember, we've talked about slow but active reading. This means that you need to assess. You need to assess the article in this way. You need to know in each section you read what, who, when, where, how, why, but you need to do it in a structured way, and you need to fill the gap. So when you go and read that section, you put these words in your mind, and then when you read, okay, this is what, this is who, this is when, this is where, and so on. So you fill the gap of these words. And always you take notes when you read any part. And if you don't know any word, if you don't know any, if you see me pausing, then probably somebody is texting me a question. If you don't know any word, you need to look it up. Don't pass any segment or any part of any part or any structure of the article without knowing the word. Okay. Next is another question. What is the structure of an article? I'm going to unmute everybody, but please kindly make sure that your surrounding is not noisy. So I'm gonna unmute everybody and see if anybody want to answer this question. Any volunteer want to answer the question?
Okay. Yes, Dr. Yahya.
Yes, please.
Yes, and Dr. Muhammad Mahmoud. The article starts with the title,
okay,
then introduction and then the work,
okay,
then we'll explain the methodology.
Okay.
After that, they will express the results, and then the discussion, and last to conclude.
Great.
Thank you.
You're very close. Thank you very much. You're very close in your assessment. So let's see, what is the structure of article? It starts with the title, and the title should be written in the acronym PICOT and addressing the target, and with somebody who've written the article or written the title is having practiced evidence-based medicine. And then the title, part of the title is the authorship and the abstract. The article usually starts with an introduction, and the introduction will state the purpose of the study and what is the aim of the study and what is the objectives. So these different words probably hitting same aim, but the introduction should state the purpose, the aim, and the objectives. While the background is reviewing the literature. What is literature? It states what is already known in that title. So the background starts with literature review, and literature review tells you what's already known in this area. And it tells you the gap between the known and the unknown. So, and the gap means what is the researcher going to do to fill that gap. So we have the known, we have the unknown, and there is a gap in the background that the researcher will do to fill that gap. So what is known, what they will do, and what they will achieve to get that unknown. And then we'll move to methodology, and it tells you the research design. Because the design of the research is vital depending on the type of the research. And also it tells you about the subject, the patient, the people, the individuals that you're selecting if you're doing a human study. Also, it can be animal if you're doing animal study. So the method will tell you how you select these subjects, or in another method, how you're sampling, and how you're acquiring the data, how you're collecting the data, and how you will plan or how you will analyze these data. While the result tells you facts. It can be in tables, it can be in graphs, it can be other pictures, and it also can be a fact text. And then you move to the discussion. The discussion will also repeat the finding, but it will compare. Compare to what? Compare to what is known. So compare their fact, the result, their finding, or the finding to what is known. So one of the weaknesses of articles, when they start to compare, they will start to compare articles or references or non-information that is not mentioned in the pachygram. That's a big defect in an article. So they need, when they compare, you compare only what you mention as known. And also, they usually in the discussion say something about the impact of their study or that research on the field or on the population. And they will give some hint what they are thinking, what their future direction. Okay, and in that place, it's allowed in the article to exaggerate a little bit, to speak outside the box. So again, the structure of article: title, abstract, introduction, background, method, result, and discussion. Okay, so the question is to the all audience, and if anybody, I will unmute all, and anybody want to answer the question, is why and how the structure of an article varies. So I'm going to unmute everybody. Please make sure that your background, there is no noise.
ودخلوا الأوضة.
Anybody want to answer?
الغالب نام.
Because there is noise, I will mute everything. So if you kindly make your background noisy. Don't meet with people, meet yourself. Don't speak with people because you're making noise. Okay? Okay, so I'm gonna proceed.
Slide.
The content of an article, which is the introduction, the background, the method, result, discussion, varies depending on the journal preference. And journal preference differ in the style of the articles. What is the font? How they organize structure? Are they one column or there are two columns? Okay. How they partitionate, how they make their pages, how they do the head notes and footnotes, sorry. And what is the content? Sometimes the journals are varies in their content. They also vary in their layout, the color, the pictures, the size, and so on. They vary also in the order. So sometimes not all the articles make the same orders of content, like introduction, then background, then method. They might change the order. And also they might change the name. So they might say no, they might remove the introduction and they may call it background, and the background they may call it rationale, and so on. Methodology, they call it methodology, or they call it method, or they call it materials, and so on. Result, they may call it finding. And also the journals are varies in the length of each section. And the variation also not only for the journal, but also in the field of the study. So each field might have certain preference to certain sections. For example, and I will also say the examples of these studies, but also the variation can be in the intent of the journal, what they are looking for and what they are intend to do. And also sometimes they vary because they have affiliation with other organizations or institutes. For example, medicine, nursing, public health, and general science, usually the background are very long and detailed. So the purpose or the objectives, background or rationale, and some people call it introduction, it gives you the literature review or what is known. But the final paragraph tells you the purpose or the objectives, which is usually indicating what is not known. So for example, this last paragraph of an introduction, and you can see when we assess the background, we saw active, okay, but slow and active reading. And how we do that? We ask what in that section, and you can see what they stated very clearly that they are studying the effect of cigarette and tobacco on women who has miscarriages. And then you can see they said who? They're women attending regional health system. And also they state when, because between 2004 and 2018. And you can see they also state where in the federally qualified health centers across 5 states. And you can see also they state how, what they will do to collect the data. In addition, they also state why they are doing this. Because they are hoping to their best to identify how tobacco and smoking affect miscarriages. Okay, and this part of the paragraph is why is vital to read it if you decide to read the entire article. So if you want to decide to read all the articles, it's vital to read this part because it tells you why. It summarizes actually all the articles because it tells you what is the purpose and the intent of the researcher. So my question to all audience, and I hope that all of you are muting your background because I'm going to unmute everybody, is what is a prospective study? So I'm going to unmute everybody. Any volunteer? Okay. So I'm going to mute everybody. So Muhammad, I will unmute you. Who want to answer? He can raise his hand or her hand because I have lots of noise when I unmute everybody. So you can raise your hand to answer the question, and I can unmute you if any volunteer. Because when I mute everyone, there is noise. Some people are speaking with their families and children while hearing. Anyone to volunteer to answer the question can raise her or his hand, or can text me if you want to answer the question. Okay? Any volunteer? Okay. So I'm gonna continue. So the method is somewhat description of what is going on from the start to the end. How they gonna do the consent, when they do the study, where they are doing the study, how they can enroll the patient, how they can recruit, how they collect the data, how they will analyze the data, and so on. It describes everything from the start to the end in the articles. It tells you the study design. It tells you the resource, the data resource, how they're going to collect the data. Is it primary or secondary data? What is the type of the data, and so on. When we will study our study design session, we will understand a little bit more about the data source. It describes exactly the population of the study or the sample of the study. And when it decide, because when we'll take the more sessions, you will understand the difference between population, targeted population, and sample size. So to do the population and then targeted population and then sample, you need to have a selection, how you're selecting your subject or your individuals. And then you need to speak specifically about the data element, the variables that you are doing in your research. And when we'll take more sessions, we will speak about that. And after you select your subject and you get your data from your subject, whether it's intervention or not, how you will analyze it. The method usually describe that part. And after you analyze your data, how you're going to present it, how you're going to show it to people to understand it. And after you present it, you need to validate it. Is it significant or not significant? So let's speak about a little bit of study design, and then we'll answer our previous question. The study can be cross-sectional, and it's like a snapshot. It's like a video clip. You go one time in one place, ask a group of people, do a bunch of questions, and you're done. One time, one session. Okay. While retrospective study is a cohort study. It's a study done on a long period of time, and it includes there is a risk of a disease and there is a disease. But the researcher, the investigator, look at the relation between the risk and the disease retrogradely. So the researcher will collect all the disease patients and then start to search out what are the risks that can cause. And usually they do that by recall. So they ask the patient to recall their memory, to use the best of their memory to find the relation between the risk and the relation between the risk and the disease. So I have more in the waiting room. Let me admit them. Okay. While the prospective study, it's close to the retrospective, but the investigator start the disease or the searching or the investigating the disease before the risk that might cause the disease occur. So we have the investigator, then the risk occurs, and then the disease process. And to do that, the investigator need to monitor the patient through the whole period. So in prospective, you go by recalling, while in prospective, you go by monitoring. And both of them are called cohort because you are accumulating, you are cohorting the subjects. So we talked about cross-sectional, about cohort, whether prospective or retrospective, but also we can do case study. And the case study, we can report. So I'm practicing neonatology, a very interesting case, I will report it. But sometimes I have a series of questions. That would happen in Mohan, where there is a series of mysteriously presenting cases in kind of respiratory symptoms, and there are around 7 or to 10, and then they've discovered that it's a new disease, or it's a corona. So you can do a one case report, but you can do a series report. Other study that you're doing, you can do observational study. An observational study but it can be cohort, it can be case study, it can be cross-sectional. You're just observing. You're not interfering with, you're not doing, you're not changing the environment. You're not changing the treatment. You're not changing the investigation. You're just observing whatever there to see a relation. An example, it can be case control, and it can be cohort. It can be prospective, it can be retrospective. Okay, and it can be neither case control nor cohort. It can be ecological, which is study the relation between for example, any natural disaster like a tornado or volcano and their effect on the population, like movement of the population, gender of the population, age of the populations who are prone to death, and so on. What are the effect of the demography, the effect of these natural disasters on the population? But remember that ecological study are weak study. However, they are very important because you have no other ways of studying the natural disasters. The other things, the studies can be interventional. I mean, because you are interfering. And when you interfere, you can interfere in a randomized way, or you can interfere in non-randomized way. So my question to the audience, I'm not gonna unmute everybody because not all of us are adhering the rules of attending a webinar by sitting in an isolated room or using a headphone so others will not hear your noise. So the question is, what is bias? If you want to answer the question, you can text me or you can raise your hand if you know how to raise your hand. Any volunteer? Any volunteer? You can text me, so I unmute you if you want to answer. Or you can raise your hand. Okay, no volunteer. So Muhammad is raising his hand. Muhammad Mustafa, I'm going to unmute you, Muhammad. Muhammad Mustafa, Muhammad Mustafa, where is Muhammad Mustafa? Muhammad Mustafa. Oh, I cannot find him. Okay, so let's unmute you. Yes, Muhammad, tell me.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum
This
salam.
bias is the uncountable factor which can affect the study result, like confounder factor.
Yeah, they are confounder, but they are part of the confounding, but they are not confounder.
They are uncountable factors.
Yeah, they are part of the confounders. They look like confounder, but they are actually not confounders. The confounders, all the factors that affecting the study, but they are not biased. They look like confounders. So there is a little bit of difference between bias and confounders. They are same, but the confounders is something you cannot control. But the bias is same of the confounder, but the researcher can control. And either they decide not to control them, or they don't know how to control them, or they cannot control them. Okay, but the co-founders, you cannot usually either you cannot see them, or sometimes you cannot control them. So they are a little bit different, but yes, bias is something look like a confounder. Okay, so let me mute everybody and let's continue. So again, the method, the most important part of the method is speaking about the bias, because the bias will make the study good or not as good as the researcher was willing to. And the bias is a systemic error in the searching measurement. So, and it's inherent feature in the design. So when you start to select your patient, you want that patient, or when you start selecting your individuals or subject, you want that individual to represent that arm and that population. And to do that, you have to do it in a specific way to actually, as much as you can, as higher percentages as you can, to represent that population. And if you do some error in doing that, then you can get a bias. And when we'll speak about examples, you'll understand it clearly. So the bias can be systematic and can be systematic because the study design that you have, you have to do it. You are accepting that bias. Or you can sometimes you are not accepting bias, but you are unintentionally doing that bias. The bias can be random and can be non-random. An example of bias. There's something called selection bias. So for example, when we do case control in rare diseases, because if I have a rare syndrome, like let's say Wilson-McKitty syndrome, a very rare disease, occur like once in thousands of patients, okay? You cannot study the whole population because you need to study million. So what you do is you select these patients, and then you start to select control, trying to match exactly the risk factors in these patients, like they call it case control, and it's for rare diseases. And because you are selecting the control and selecting the patient, you might do selection bias, whether it's intentional or whether it's not intentional. So again, you have a case, you have a control, and then you need to select. And you make sure that the case and control are balanced regarding the risk factors. And if that balance is not there, you're doing a selection bias. The bias can be monitoring bias. So for example, when we talked about prospective study, we've said that there is a risk and there is a disease, and the investigators start before the disease, before the risk causes the disease, and the researcher will monitor. And because when you monitor, you have tools, you have data, or you have items to monitor like vital signs or pictures or lab or whatever. And because you're monitoring, you might do a monitoring bias. Okay, so you might start to monitor control better than cases, or cases better than control for some reason, whether it's intentional or it's inherent error in your design, and then you have a bias. Also, remember, when we do prospective, we're asking the patient that have the disease about the risk factor that we might think is causing the disease. And that's why they have to use their memory. And that's if they forget, or some people have a good memory, depending on the age, the gender, the location, the job, and so on, you can have a recall bias. It's not related to the relation between the risk and disease, but just merely because you're asking a human being, and a human being has different memory capacity. You can have time bias. So for example, if you're doing the difference between male and female, but for that area, male are working during the day. So all the patient during the morning is female. So when you do the study in the morning, you have gender preference to the word male, toward female, and so on. Or you can have selection bias, or you have acceptance bias, because when you do, for example, survey, or you do study, just in case in that country, female are refusing to participate, while male are refusing, while male accepting, or age of 30s to 40 usually accept, the younger and older refuse. So because you're doing, you have to have a consent. So sometimes you get acceptance bias. And then if you have to state that in your research, if you realize that there is bias, and if you state it, you have to state it in your method. And then randomization, okay? And when we will think about sample size and randomization and how we generate randomizations, we will know the problem. Because if you have 100 patients and you ask the program to generate randomization, it can be anything between 1 to 100. But by chance, it can be in a sequence. So by chance, it might be 1 to 10. And when you do the study, you're doing it over time. And for any reason, for any issues related to that study, these number 10 might occur only in January, but the rest occur in June and something. So you have a preference to that first 10 to occur in June and in January, not in July, and therefore you will have effect, and because of the time. So you need to do the randomization or block randomization to avoid that. When we'll talk about randomization, you can understand. But always there is a bias in the randomization. The method also will state the data analysis. And data analysis can be by software. It has a different method and different types of analysis. So different method of analysis, but in each method, there is types of analysis. Once you present the data, the method will tell you how you present it. You present it in text, or for example, you give it as a percentages, or you give it as a frequency table, or you can present it as rates, and so on. You can present the data in a different way. And once you present the data, you need to test the data. You need to validate the data. And the validation and testing gives you the significance of data. Is there a statistical difference? And also it tells you the relation between these variables that you are studying. And this all mentioned in the method. So the question is, what is wrong inclusion criteria can do, and what is wrong exclusion criteria can do? If anybody want to answer, either raise your hand or text me so I can unmute you. And if there is no volunteer, I can continue. So we'll give you seconds for people to volunteer and answer. Okay, I have a volunteer, I think. Dr. Alam is volunteering, so let's unmute him. Yes, Dr. Alam, tell me.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Yahya. Thank you for interesting lecture. Inclusion criteria will affect sample size. If you restricted the inclusion criteria, need actually large sample size to represent your population. But if you have generous inclusion criteria, could be you need just a small sample size.
Correct.
Isn't it?
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Absolutely right. And what is wrong in the what is wrong exclusion criteria can do?
Yeah, exclusion criteria. If you have a limited exclusion criteria, meaning you have could be you have large number of bias. Otherwise, if you have
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
That's correct.
yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
So exactly, and then we'll speak about that. So the method also specify the inclusion criteria. And the more when you relax your inclusion criteria, and I can give you an example. You have a cinema, and in that cinema you have a gate, and the more wide the gate, the more people can enter. Okay, but the problem is you'll have a heterogeneity. But if you have a small gate, less people can enter. So the inclusion criteria is who's entering that gate to see the movie, to the cinema. While exclusion criteria, after they enter, you open other small doors to get people out, the people that you don't like from the cinema. And therefore, because you're selecting them and getting them out, you get selection bias. So the exclusion criteria affect the selection and you get bias, and the inclusion criteria affect your sample size. So if you relax it, if you have big, wide gate, you get more sample size, but you have a problem in studying the differences between this because you have different people. And exclusion criteria is a small doors in that cinema. After the big gate, you are taking out people because of their certain features, their color, their dress, and so on. So because you're selecting them, because sometimes you might intentionally select the people that you don't like, then you get bias. You get something called selection bias. Also, the exclusion criteria affect the confounding variables. So when you limit your exclusion criteria, so if you relax your exclusion criteria, you get selection bias. If you limit your exclusion criteria, you get confounding variables because you're including more people. So the question is, what is the hook, and where is the hook is good, and where is the hook is bad? And it's just a funny question, who's making very famous hooks these days? So if you want to answer, you can text me and I can unmute you, because I thought this is the best way to control the noise. Any volunteer? Okay, I have volunteer. So let me see. Okay, Dr. Alam won't answer the question. So let's unmute you. Oops. The computer refused to unmute Alam. Unmute, please. Okay, yeah, you are unmute, Dr. Alam. You can answer the question. Dr. Alam, are you with me?
Okay. I will mute.
Or you're muting yourself.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it is exaggeration of estimation hope, and
correct.
And where should be the best position to be in discussion? I think.
Yeah.
And if it is bad, will be in abstract. And one famous known President Trump, I think, is it?
Yeah. So excellent. So the hook is an exaggeration. So when you can exaggerate when you discuss. But if you're giving fact, you cannot exaggerate. So the best position to exaggerate, because it's a discussion, you are open to say anything. Okay, so you can exaggerate, you can say your future intent of the study and so on. So absolutely correct, Dr. Allah. Or let me unmute everybody. Okay, so let's talk about the abstract. So the abstract usually somewhere between 250 to 500 words. The first line of the abstract tells you the gap, is the area where the researcher want to fill the bridge or make a bridge between what is known and what is unknown. The second two lines will talk about the objective and the purpose of the study. The next few lines will speak about the methodology, the study design, the selection, and so on. And the rest of the line, it will usually talk about the impact of the study, the result, and the potential of effect of that study, and so on. And the last line should be talk about conclusion or future direction. And here where the hook comes. So if people start to put the hook in the result, because they're saying fact, they cannot exaggerate, then probably this is not something good in the article. So what is the difference between recruitment and enrollment? So if somebody attended the previous lecture, he probably can answer. Or if somebody doing research probably can answer the question. So what is the recruitment? Okay, somebody is volunteering that. Let's see who. Oh, Alam again. So let's unmute you. Yeah, go ahead, please.
I think recruitment, as recommended as an inclusion criteria, if you have one target population, they can be recruited.
Good. Okay. Yeah, you're very close. Yeah, almost right. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think enrollment, if you have, for example, started to collect data but family or refused to sign consent, well, we can enroll this patient in this in the study. Is that?
Okay. You're almost close. So let me answer the question. Okay. So let's speak about the result, and then we'll speak about recruitment and enrollment. So the result will tell you the sample size, the recruitment, and the enrollment. So recruitment is simply meeting your inclusion criteria. So let's say I'm going to study all the babies admitted to an ICU. Once the patient admitted to an ICU, he or she is meeting the inclusion criteria, then this is recruited. And you need to mention that number. While enrollment is getting the intervention or start collecting the data. And the difference between recruitment and enrollment, either because meeting the exclusion criteria or refusal of consent or loss of the individual or the subject. So the difference between enrollment and recruitment is either meeting the exclusion criteria, so it had to be taken from the study, or the parent or the patient or the individual refusing consent, so acceptance problem. And the third one is loss of the individual. Death, for example, or travel, for example, or loss of the contact details if you're doing phone calls and so on. And the difference, recruitment minus enrollment gives you the consenting rate. If it's only the consent, if you're excluding the, and the difference between recruitment and enrollment gives you the exclusion rate. And the difference between recruitment and enrollment gives you the loss of individual, loss of subject rate. So again, the result will tell you subject loss, It tells you the design of the study. It tells you the randomization process, the difference between the arms, the problem happens during randomization, and so on. And what is the intervention? What are the arms? It also describes the individuals or the subject, the demographic, the age, the color, the gender, the length, the weight, the height, and so on. The result also will give the data, and data can be an object, can be figures, can be tables, can be facts. When you look at table, you must look at the labels and the unit. You look to the range of the values. So for example, if you have a histogram, you have the range of the values and you have the percentage of the values. It's vital to look before you're reading a table. And look, when you have a graph or a table, look if there is a zeros, start with zeros or not starting with zeros, which mean the X, Y's are meeting or not meeting. And they have equal value and they have no equal value, it depends. You also look at the legend or the description of the table inside the cell and the footnotes. And you look on the result, it gives you the logic of a presentation, the flow of the data from collecting to presenting, how the data was collected, presented, analyzed, presented, and validated, and then the rationale when you reach to the discussion. You always will have an exchange of information between the results and discussion. And the question here, but I already answered the question, what are the two parts of an article where information can be exchanged? And the answer is the result and the discussion. So let's move to the discussion. Usually, the first part of the first paragraph of the discussion will summarize the result. And it depends on the journals and the space they give you for discussion. You might express all the finding, or you might express the important positive or the important negative finding. The discussion will focus on the following: the implication of the study. And therefore, because it's a discussion, you can exaggerate whatever you like. But also it tells the limitation. If you have a bias, if you have a problem, what is limitation? And the limitation of the study finding on your implementation of the study result in your practice. It tells you what is the strength of the article, and most of the researchers will concentrate on that. And usually the research or the discussion will end in a hook. And the hook is, it can be exaggeration of article to bring attention, or it can tell some information to bridge between the current article, as it become now known, to the future articles, which is yet not known. So it's like suggesting a new study. Okay? Finally, when you read an article, do it slow. Don't read in rush, but do active. And how you do active? You do who, where, how, these words. You put it in front of your eye, and then you start to select and fill the gaps. See? So you need to, when you read slow but active, you need to know what, who, when, where, how, and why. And when you start to feel, when you start to read and assess an article, you start to tick. Yeah, they express what, they express who, they express when, they express where, and so on. You can assess the articles. You can identify the problems, whether they're fitting these sequence of words or not. Because remember, when you read only the abstract, it's missed lots of information. So it's not enough to read an article, to read only the abstract. You need to read the entire article, but read it in the way that we've expressed. And remember, when you start to read, if you want to read the entire article, start by the last paragraph of the background, because it tells you the unknown. And probably sometime mentioned the gap or the bridge the researcher want to do to link the known to the unknown. It's vital to start also reading the first few lines of the discussion because it summarizes the result. So the last paragraph tells you the intent. The first few lines of the discussion tells you the result, summarize the result usually. And remember, when you scan the method, look at the study design because the method is the clue for the study design. When you have the study design, you will know the bias. And knowing the bias, make your review of that study very fair. And remember, bias affects the sample size, and the sample size is one of the foundation of an article. Now let's practice. I'm going to practice a little bit fast, but for my advice to the all audiences is to select an article in the area you like and start the video that I will post on YouTube and start to read the article exactly the way I said, and see you need to practice 4 to 5 times, and probably that time you'll digest because it's really hard materials and it might be a new for some of you. So let's look to an abstract of an article. Although this is an article, you can see there is sections, but not all the abstract, there is sections. It depends on the journal. So you can see they state the few lines, they state the background, okay? And this tells you the unknown. And then they state the method. And the method tells you the randomization, the type of data, the age of the selection of the population. It also tells you how they randomize, if this is a randomization study. It also tells you the outcome of the primary. Usually the study has primary outcome, but it may have one secondary outcome or many outcomes. And also the abstract will contain the result. So the result tells you the enrollment, the demography of the data. It also tells you the primary outcome result. And usually it mentions the significance and the data and the analysis of data and significance. But also it tells you the secondary outcomes. And then conclusion. And you can see in this conclusion, it's very short, and you know that there is no hook, there is no exaggeration, they're just telling you the fact. They're not exaggerating, saying, okay, leave the surfactant, just do CPAP. They're not telling you that intubation and surfactant is a replacement of CPAP, but they're simply mentioning you CPAP is a good alternative for intubation and surfactant in preterm babies. There is no exaggeration. But if I want to exaggerate, I say, well, CPAP is the clue. CPAP can do anything. Without CPAP, babies can die, and so on. So usually in the abstract conclusion, they only concentrate on the primary outcome, not the secondary outcomes. So let's read the introduction of this article. You can see it in the introduction, they are reviewing the literature. So you can see the reference 1 and 2 and reference 3. So remember, it's a review of articles. It's what is known, what is there. And it's important when you write introduction from other articles, it's to write it in your own way. So you read the article, you don't copy and paste. Even if you're referencing, that's called plagiarism or falsification, okay? You cannot write the same text from a different articles. You have to read the articles and write it in your way and then reference it. So reference does mean copy and paste. If you want to copy and paste, you have to quote. And quoting have a rules. So you have to put it between 2 brackets and you have to state quoting from. And then, so quoting is different from referencing. But you can see they are referencing here and they're talking about what is known. The other part of the introduction is also, continuing describing what is known. And in this part, they're talking what is the problem, why the known is not enough. Okay, for example, with CPAP, they're talking about pneumothorax and so on, and the intubation and so on. So they speak now about what is the problem of known. They're trying to see they're trying to say what is really unknown here. What is the problem of the known? And then they state, how they can fix that unknown to bridge it to the known, or they call it the gap, or what they want to do to achieve linking the known to the unknown. And you can see the method will speak about the study design, will speak about the arm, because this is an interventional study, so probably you have more arms, and then you need to describe the arm and also how you randomize between the two arms and so on. And also you need to talk about the primary outcome in detail in your method, and the and also to speak about your secondary outcomes, and also you want to analyze your data. And then in the result, you are stating the facts. So mostly the result will start with a major demographic information as a text, but also state the primary outcome result and secondary outcomes if more than one. So in the demography, they state the age, the gender, the selection, the number of recruitment, the enrollment, the success rate, the data loss, and so on. And you can see they are either facts and demographic, or they are tables and figures. You can see when we're talking about the outcome, we're talking about the p-value, and we'll speak about the data analysis later on and what is the meaning of p-value and how we can do it in different models. Okay, but you can see in the result, they are stating their significance, whether the difference between the two arms are really statistically significant or merely due to observational significance, not statistically considerable. The secondary outcome, same, but there can be one or more than outcomes, and they also will speak about significance. So they state the data and they speak about the significance. You can see that this is a table, and most of the time, the first table is stating the demography of the individual or of the subject, and the secondary outcomes usually compare the significance. You can see you have arm CPAP and you have surfactant, and you're studying the significant. Here is talking about the relative risk, or you can also talk about absolute risk, and we can see on this relative risk whether they are statistically significant. When we talk about statistical analysis, we'll speak about relative risk and the meaning of this data, but this is not the purpose. But in the second table, usually the frequency table, usually they state the significance and what they did to achieve that significance. More significance, but also they can present it in a figures. This data has no figures, but they can present it in figures. And then we move to discussion, and you can see in the discussion, they right away, they summarize the result, and they talk about the gap. So they start by talking on the gap, and also they start to summarize the result. And usually they give possible explanation to their result. So they state the result, they state their gap, and they state the result, and then the explanation to that. And then once you move in the result, in the discussion, they start to compare. But the end of the result, they will give summary. Okay? So I'm done with, and I hope that you guys can select an article in your field and go through this video slowly and start to pause and try to practice one by one. So I am going to ask questions, and I hope that you guys can answer. And if you want to participate, because again, some of you are not in a quiet room, I only will receive a text message, and I will unmute that person to answer the question. So now the question, what is slow but active reading? If there is any volunteer to answer the question, you can text me. Okay, I have a volunteer. And Dr. Alam is one to answer. And thank you, Dr. Alam, for your active participation. So I'm going to unmute you. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Yahya, for the interesting lecture. Actually, as you said, it should be a systematic who, when, where, how, why. We have to look to
Great.
structure.
So you have to read in details, but you have to read a focus reading. So you put your objectives in front of you, and then you say, okay, I'm looking to who, I'm looking to what, I'm looking to where, I'm looking to when, I'm looking to how. And then by scanning this, it's very good. And if this process is very important, if also when you're taking IELTS exam, for example, if you do that, you can very well manage your time during examination. And I know many people have a problem in IELTS exam because they cannot manage their time. But doing this in slow but active reading, you can really achieve very good in IELTS. So the same way you can apply it to reading an article. So I'm gonna mute all. Okay, so the second question is how to assess the title. Any volunteer but other than Dr. Alam? Okay, so I have Mason. You want to answer? Let me unmute you. Okay, I have to find Mason. It was easy to find Alam because his name is first name. Okay, well, let's unmute Mason. Yes, Mason, tells me.
By PyCode, you can.
Yeah, so you have three pillars, not only PyCode. You have the PyCode, but also you have the target, and you should be expert in that area, practicing evidence-based. So these are three pillars when you assess a title. You have to, by acronym, PyCode, and also you should have the target of the study. So what are the researcher targeting? Is the research, is it interventional? Is it a therapeutic? Is it interventional? Is it patient value, and so on? And also you should be a person who practices in that area. So for example, can't a neonatologist assess a title for obstetrician, though he has done very good following, he know the target, he know the PICOT, and but he's not practicing. So you're handicapped. You're losing one of the pillars to assess a title. So you need these three pillars to assess the title. Okay, so let me mute all. I think I'm doing very good in controlling the room noise. Okay, the third question, what is the last part of the paragraph talk about? Any volunteer? Muhammad Sayyid. So let's unmute you. Muhammad. Okay, lower your hand and unmute. Okay, so you can speak now, Doctor. I unmute you. You can speak. Dr. Muhammad, are you with me? Muhammad Sayyid. صح? Should I unmute everybody? Let me try unmute everybody. Okay. Anybody want to answer? Just introduce yourself. Yeah. Answer.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Who's speaking?
I am Dr. Muhammad. Yes.
Yeah. Go ahead.
The last part of the background it usually assesses the purpose or the target of the study, which includes the knowledge gap in the field.
Correct. So it talks about the purpose, about the objectives, about the gap, about the intent of the researcher they want to do. Okay. So let me mute everybody, and let's move to the next question. So what is not the hook? This is a typing error. What is the hook and where it should be placed? Well, let me unmute everybody so you can just introduce yourself. And okay, any volunteer, introduce yourself if you want to answer the question.
Yes, Dr. Muhammad. I am Dr. Muhammad.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes, the hood is exaggeration of what you conclude.
So the exaggeration of your finding.
Exaggeration of the conclusion. It should be in the discussion area.
Great.
It should be in the discussion area, not
great.
in the.
Yes, absolutely. So thank you very much for answering. So the hook is exaggeration, is the future intent, is where the researcher want to go, and it should be in the discussion. The reason the discussion is not fact, it's a discussion. So you can say anything in the discussion. Okay, so let's move to other question. Where to find the primary and secondary, not outcomes. So I'm gonna unmute everybody and see if you can answer the question. Any volunteer, say your name and answer the question.
Dr. Alam Abu Hamda.
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead, please, Dr. Alam.
Yeah, can be seen in two sites in article in the result, and even in the method we can see the result.
Yes, great. Yes, yes, you are absolutely right. So you can see sometime, you can see it in 3 places. You can see it in the abstract, you can see it in the discussion, you can see it in the methodology, and you can see it, you can see it also in the result. Okay, so the next question. What is the effect of inclusion criteria on the study? Any volunteer? Yes, go ahead.
As I mentioned before, inclusion criteria will affect sample size.
Correct.
We have,
exactly. Yes. So what is the effect of the exclusion criteria?
Exclusion criteria will affect if we have
the bias.
Bias will affect selection bias.
Will affect the bias.
Yeah.
Okay. What type of study design for rare diseases or rare problems?
Case control study.
Case control study. Exactly. Exactly.
Case series. Maybe case series of case study.
Okay. Oh, case series. No, case series is not a study. Is observational. But for rare diseases, case control. So they are not 1 case or 2 cases. Anyhow, I concluded the study. If you guys have any question, that will be great. So I will post today the next session, and I think I can do the next session tomorrow night. And if for any reason somebody cannot attend, I'm happy to repeat it. And also I will post this on YouTube. So I encourage you to review the first session and this session and practice on articles. And if you find a difficulty, you can communicate with me on Facebook and also on WhatsApp. So thank you very much. And
thank you so much.
I appreciate your attendance.